So, welcome, friends. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have the 15th lecture of the series, and the title of the lecture is Meaning and Function of Research Design. We are beginning this topic on the research design, and it would take a few lectures to complete this because research design is very important for research. Research design is like the planning, is like the blueprint of the research. We build a house, the architect is expert in designing the houses. From each nitty gritty, from small to big things, he takes into care, and then after that he hands over this planning blueprint of the house to us, and the construction goes accordingly. This makes the construction systematic, hurdleless, and smooth. Without that, on every step, decision has to be taken. Without that, one is unclear of what to do next. He is in confusion, and in this process of confusion, the result or the house building would not be smooth. Same way, when we have decided a topic, defined the topic, selected the topic and defined it, or selected the problem and defined the problem, then comes the strategy to build a research design. So, the research design also takes into care all the aspects of how the research would be done, how the research would be processed, it would be carried out on each step. As we have in the very beginning clarified that a scientific research is a systematic research, and it is a step by step process. This is why the research design takes care of each step, all the steps which would come into the process of studying this problem. And this is why the research design is so important. It is because when we develop a research design, we can smoothly proceed in the data collection, we can smoothly proceed for the processing of the data, and we are very clear in the analysis of the data. Step by step, everything is decided, and we smoothly proceed into our research. That is, in short, the research design. So, next to once we have selected the problem, we have defined the problem, the researcher has to prepare the design of the project, which is commonly known as the research design. It can be called as a conceptual structure within which research is conducted. It can also be called the blueprint for collection, measurement and analysis of the data. As such, the design includes an outline of what the researcher will do from the hypothesis and its operation implications to the final analysis of the data, because the hypothesis is to be tested, and so the 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 data would be collected accordingly, and this all has to be decided from the very beginning. There are certain questions which the research design must take into consideration, and if these questions have to be dealt in the research design. What are those questions? What is the study about? What we are going to study? That is should be very clear. We are studying India-China relations. That is very clear. We are studying India-Saudi Arabia relations. That is very clear. We are studying the implementation of MDM scheme in India. That must be very clear. We are studying the problem of divorce. We are studying the problem of the drug addiction. That should be very clear. And why we are studying this? That has also to be clear in the research design. Why India-China relations is being studied by us, by the researcher? Why India-Saudi Arabia relations is being studied by the researcher? Why the problem of drug addiction is being studied by the researcher? Why the problem of divorce is being studied by the researcher? That must be very clearly spelled out in the design. Then the design must be very clear. Where will the study be carried out? Because whether it would be done, say, in India-Saudi relations, where it would be conducted, because it matters. It matters for the data collection, and it matters for the further proceeding. This is why it should be very clear. What type of data is required? Because there are problems in which we have to have the primary data. We do not have any alternative. And there are problems in which we have to have the secondary data. There is no alternative. So, what type of the data would be required? If suppose we are studying the India-China relations or India-Saudi Arabia trade, then we have to have the secondary data. However, if we are studying the problem of drug addiction, problem of begging, problem of divorce, then we have to have the primary data. So, the design has to be very clear, and is linked to the earlier question, where the study would be carried out. We have to mention that, because it will affect the kind of data we are going to study. Further, the research design must explain where can the required data be found? It has to explain. If suppose we are working on Indian migrant workers in Gulf cooperation countries, then we have to explain where the data would be would be found. The data is to be collected whether in UAE, which has the largest concentration of Indians, or the data would be collected within India, from where there is large concentration of people working in Gulf countries like, for example, Kerala, where the data can be found. That is also important. The design has to take care of it. Further, what periods will the study include? If suppose again we are working on Indian migrant workers in the Gulf countries, then the process started in long back, but the massive outflow of the Indian labor began in the 70s. So it is already about half a century that this phenomenon is existing in large numbers. So the period has to be decided. If we decide for 50 years, then the research would be very difficult to carry out, and the results can also not reflect the current situation. So it is better that we define that the period could be, say, 21st century, or the period could be post-COVID, or the period could be say since 1995 or since 2005, but this period has to be justified logically. So we have to have the period also logically taken care of in the design. Further, what would be the sample design? Because the large studies like Indian migrant workers in GCC countries, or drug addiction, problem of drug addiction, or problem of divorce, these are big studies. So large studies, it constitutes of large number of course finite, but large number of universe or population in statistical terms, and in general terms large number of or large number of the respondents. So the sample is to be taken. Sample is of many types. Which particular sample design would be suitable for our research, that has to be explained in the research design itself. There are various kind of sampling method. Which kind of sampling method suits our research best would be selected. That has to be again logically justified and also mentioned clearly in the research design. What techniques of data will be used? There are various techniques of data collection. If it is secondary data, then also it's not that we will collect it from anywhere, no. But if it is the primary data, then also we have many methods: observation method, interview method, schedule method, questionnaire method. So, we have to select the appropriate method of data collecting, method and technique of data collection in the sample design itself. We have to decide it, because we are very clear from the very beginning how we have to proceed. That is the benefit of research design. Further, how data would be analyzed? There are various ways to analyze the data. We have the various kind of tests, various kinds to study the variance between factors, and association within the factors. We have various kind of studies. So, which would be proper for us to study? Say, if we are working on Indian migrant workers to GCC countries, there are alternative methods of analyzing the data. The latest is the gravitational model. Should we go according to that, or we should adopt an ordinary least square? We should go for correlation or regression, multiple regression. These all to be decided in the research design. Again, in what style the report is going to be prepared, that has also to be decided in the very beginning. The kind of referencing style, bibliography, every nitty and gritty of the research, from small to big aspects, are to be taken care of in the research design. This is why research design is so important. Further, keeping in view of the above stated design which we discussed, the overall research design is split into following subsections, broadly of course. What is that? Number one, the sampling design. It deals with the method of selecting items to be observed for the given study. How the sample would be made, because the sample have to be representative of the population that we are studying, because the conclusions or the results that we are going to have from the sample is to be generalized for whole of the population. So, the sample design is very important. The beauty of sampling is that the sample has to be representative of the population, and this is why sample design is so important. If the sample design is not good, then what will happen? The generalization that we would do from the sample study will not be leading us to the true results. And if the sample design is perfect, the sample selected represents largely 95%, 99% or 90% of the population characteristics, then there is no problem in generalizing the conclusion or results of the findings from the sample for the whole of the population, and this is why the sampling design is so important. Then the observational design, it relates to the conditions under which the observation is reported. The observation is very important. Because if suppose we are studying the beggars in Aligarh, how do we observe them? To collect the data. That is very important. Because after all, beggars are not going to reply our questionnaire. So, it is the observation method which will be effective here. But then, in what conditions we have to observe? Whether we have to do it in a disguised way or we have to do it in an open way, which would be more suitable? These kind of questions are to be taken care of by the observational design. Further, the third broad category of the subcategory of the research design is the statistical design. It relates to the question of how many items are to be observed and how the information and data gathered is to be analyzed. How to collect the data, how to analyze the data, how to document the data. These are to be taken care of by the statistical design. Suppose the study is related to the secondary data, then also we have to mention the prepare the blueprint for collection, processing and analysis of the data. And if it is the primary data, then also we have to mention clearly the way we are going to work on the collection of data, documentation of data and its analysis. That is the subject of statistical design. Then finally, the operational design. What is that? It is concerned with the techniques by which the procedures specified in the sampling, statistical and observational designs can be carried out. It is the implementational design. How the earlier designs would be implemented, that is the operational design, because it should also be clear that the way to implement these designs carefully and successfully is to be taken care of by the operational design. So, what we have discussed already in this design section, we can state the important features of research design as follows. It is a plan that specifies the sources and types of information relevant to the research problem that the researcher has taken up for his or her research. It is a strategy specifying which approach will be used for gathering and analysis of the data, which we discussed earlier. It also includes the time and cost budgets, since most studies are done under these two constraints: constraint of the time and constraint of the budget. The researchers, if they are getting fellowship, they have a limited period of time, and anyway one has to, there is minimum period also and maximum period also for submission of the thesis, which is in fact the rules are made by the UGC, and the universities have to implement accordingly. So there is time constraint and of course budget constraint, because research is something which cannot be done free of cost. It involves lot of cost, secretarial expenditure, expenditure in collection of the data, and various kind of expenditures are involved. So the collection of the materials, there are various expenditures involved in research. So the design must take care of the budget and the time. These are two constraints under which a researcher works. There is no unlimited time, there is no unlimited budget. They both are limited, and with these two constraints, the research has to be done. So a research design must take into care these two constraints also. Now, what are the functions of research design? Number one, it provides a blueprint. Like I said, a house builder needs detailed plans to avoid construction issues. And similarly, a research design outlines decisions regarding sampling questions, data collection methods, which minimizes the problems by deciding all the steps in advance. Secondly, it limits the boundaries of research activity. If we build a house, we know what is our limit, what is the boundary of our land, and within which we have to remain. We cannot extend beyond that. This also refers to the research. It is determining whether only one causes out of many causes is to be examined, only one hypothesis is to be tested, only attitudes of students of one educational institutions are to be studied, and so on. Systematic investigation is possible since the objectives are clear and the structure is also provided. Third, it enables the investigation to anticipate potential problems. All the hurdles, all the problems come up once we start working on the research design. The researcher has gone through the literature and has come to know about the alternative approaches, and this is how he gets an estimate of personnels required as investigators, cost, possible measurement of problems, and so forth. This is the benefit of the research design, because time is also limited, budget is also limited. So how many surveyors, how many investigators, how many editors are required, and whether they are in the budget or not, that has to be taken care of by the research design. Further, it offers a guide that directs the research action, which controls rather time and cost. It offers a systematic approach to the research operation so that all steps are executed in proper sequence. It takes into care coordination and effective organization. It helps in the use of resources effectively, avoiding errors and bias. Further, it enables the researcher to control the research operation most effectively when research investigators are employed. These are the functions which we have been able to discuss in brief. So, I am sure the meaning and function and the importance of research design is very clear in our minds, and this is why any research or any problem that we are going to tackle in our research pursuit has to be taken care of by the research design, and this is why research design is so important, so crucial for the researcher. Without it, he will be simply wandering into the seas. Research is sea, it's like ocean. So, if the researchers do not explicitly and clearly develop a research design, then it may be that we are unable to complete our research even in our lifetime. Then the research would become ineffective. The research has to be effective if it is done timely. Then only it can have the policy implications, because after all the researches have policy implications, whether it is the bilateral relations between countries, whether these are the bilateral trade relations between the countries, or whether these are social issues like the problems of drug addiction or the problem of the divorce. These are, if a good research design is not developed, then what will happen? That we would be simply wandering ourselves, the researcher would simply be groping in the dark. And this is why the research design is very crucial for a researcher to develop. Thank you very much. I wish uh, I have been able to made things clear to you about the research design. Thank you again.